Who are Metallica? I've never heard of them.
Yeah, I'll put something on for you. Back to the old school.
Do 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 boom. Die, die, die. Help! Please help me. Do 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 do.
What the fuck were they doing? God almighty.
They're pimply-faced teenagers on stage performing these amazing kind of musical feats.
You know that little thrash band of 3 years ago? They could be huge. They've got that potential to really appeal to a very, very big audience.
Holy crap, this band could be not just big in the UK and not just big in Europe, but this band could potentially be a worldwide phenomenon.
One thing that's characterised Metallica all the way through their career is their sincerity, you know, and up to a certain point maybe, but certainly, you know, for the first 15 years, their sincerity was everything, which is why they became the biggest metal band in the world, because that, you know, more people could relate to Metallica than to anyone else, you know, and there's a reason for that, you know.
They were so young, and when you look at the picture on the back of Kill 'Em All, you've never seen so many spots between four people. I mean, they were just kids, but they were appealing to kids of that age. I'm a spotty little herb, but I could be doing that. That's fantastic.
Metallica.
Yeah.
Their manager at the time, Johnny Z, sent me a tape which was a picture of a very unpleasant sword coming out of a toilet called Metal Up Your Ass, and I listened to it and I thought, whoa, crap, this is fantastic. And at that time, I mean, it seems weird to say it now, but you'd never heard of speed or thrash or whatever, and so it was a completely new phenomenon, and I played it to a few people, and they actually thought I was having a laugh.
It wasn't immediately obvious to everyone that either Metallica or thrash metal were forces to be genuine forces to be reckoned with, whether they had any staying power. I think some people actually considered Metallica to be a bit of a joke, but certainly on reflection it didn't take long for people to realise the quality of that album, that there were really some very strong songs there, as well as a very, very energetic sound, which really hadn't, I don't think anybody had quite heard anything like that before.
I can remember we did an initial pressing of 3,000 for the whole of Europe, and we didn't sell half of them in the first month, and I'm thinking, oh, holy crap, I've really stuffed this one.
At the time that Kill 'Em All came out, a lot of heavy metal was just about Dungeons and Dragons, and it was quite boring, it was quite cliched. It was becoming a bit embarrassing for a bit more of the intelligent side of heavy metal, so I think what Metallica did was dust the cobwebs off heavy metal and that album was kind of a blueprint of where they would go.
You have to really put it into context and perspective. Yes, we'd had Iron Maiden come through. Yes, we'd had the new wave of British heavy metal. Yes, we'd had the birth of a new form of extreme metal, thanks to bands such as Venom. But Metallica really took everything into a new arena. And the reason is simple: songs. Every track stands out. That's what made it a landmark debut. Songs, crucial songs that people remembered, and as soon as they heard the title, a medley and a melody came into the mind, as well as a heavy-duty riff.
Kill 'Em All was a collision of styles that had never really happened before. It was the old school metal, but it was also it also had the energy of punk and the speed of punk rock and hardcore, and it also had the kind of that nasty, scuzzy, you know, playing in sweaty shitholes kind of vibe to them. And Metallica had that in spades. You know, they were obviously, you know, swilling booze like maniacs, and they were all about, you know, taking speed and going berserk. And you could hear that on the record. You know, it was a dirty rock and roll record, but it was, you know, thrash metal is the phrase that absolutely defines what it was all about.
It was a turning point in the metal genre because it was so fast and it was so raw. And a lot of people found that a little bit hard to take, actually. Some people thought it wasn't polished enough. Some people thought it wasn't refined enough. On the other hand, a lot of people got really into it because it was just so fast and so heavy.
It just tapped all the touchstones that defined the genre. You know, just like the downstroke chucking guitars, you know, the finger shredding leads, you know, like the shouted vocals. I mean, just like James Hetfield was no operatic vocalist. I mean, he was like a punk singer, you know, singing those kinds of things. The only difference was they weren't three-chord melodies. They were something far more complex and aggressive. And so I think in a way, it wasn't as groundbreaking as I think a lot of people want to believe it was. It simply crystallized the sound, and it gave people a launching off point. You know, once they heard that, they knew what they should try to emulate if they wanted to be a thrash band.
If you look at the cover, you can see basically a bunch of spotty Herberts on the back, you know, with bad mullets and you know, cut-off denim jackets, and you know, they were young kids playing really loud metal, and they were drinking a lot and doing drugs and going mental, and the lyrics reflect that. You know, they weren't great philosophers, and you're not going to get, you know, sort of any kind of massive amounts of profundity in their lyrics, and nor should you. You know, I mean, Whiplash, when the chorus goes, you know, thrashing like a maniac, you know, that was what that song was about, so you didn't need to have any kind of poetry to go with that.
Basically what they were doing was just knocking out a load of metal cliches. James himself admitted this later on, that the lyrics on Kill 'Em All were just tosh. In Whiplash, there's the line, bang your head against the stage like you never did before. Make it ring, make it bleed, make it really sore. Which tells you something about the level of songwriting in 1982. I feel like a maniac. Motherfucking Whiplash!
It's just so primitive and gritty that it immediately connects with an audience. You can bang your head to it, and you know that at some point James Hetfield's going to shout Whiplash, and then the solo kicks in and everybody goes berserk and starts throwing their pints around, you know.
Oh, yeah!
It had a crazy guitar solo in that Kirk Hammett just unleashed from nowhere. It doesn't come in at a normal point in a song, it just hits you when you're not quite expecting such guitar work to kick in, and it really throws you, and because of that you just want to let rip yourself and do some air guitar work to it.
Sometimes with Slayer they tended to lose the melody in a lot of dense heaviness. Metallica never lost sight of the fact that what made a song happen was it stayed in people's minds, and Whiplash is a part of that. They do go for the blurring solos, they do go for hyper speed, but beyond all that there was a discipline and a melody.
You can only go so fast before you become just like a blur or like a drill or something. So and to actually still have any really serious musical quality, you can't really go that much faster than Whiplash. I would be very surprised if Metallica went through a whole tour and didn't play the likes of the Four Horsemen, Whiplash and Seek and Destroy. I mean, those are songs that will get, 50,000 people at a festival going mad because everybody knows them. And even though the album didn't, obviously the album sold really steadily over the years, and everybody knows those tracks now, and they're heavy metal classics.
Well, Seek and Destroy is kind of like an anthemic heavy metal song, basically. You can bang your fist in the air, you can headbang to it if you have hair. It's a bit of a no-brainer as a song, really, but what it does is it's a rebel-rousing anthem, really, for a tortured youth almost. You can bang your head, you can shake your fist, and throw the devil horns at it.
Seek and Destroy! The actual song itself is intriguing because it's about someone who goes out looking for fights, and people often mistake it for some sort of militia track, a military action and attitude. It's not. It's really about people who go out looking for fights after they've got slightly drunk or gone into other things.
Funnily enough, it was one of the songs that saw him evolve a bit as a frontman. He was quite unconfident before that, but when he had a bit that he could sing along with and get the audience to get involved with, it did him a lot of good as a performer, I think.
Come on, man! All right, then. You guys know Lars? Yes, sir. Hello!
Above all else, I mean, it's a very, very catchy song, and I think it kind of proves that Metallica always had a really good ear for sort of catchy riffs and melodies right from the beginning. So although they were very extreme, they sounded very extreme in 1983, there were still some sort of classic rock moves on the album. And Seek and Destroy is just a really simple sort of chugging riff.
Metallica always did killer choruses. There's numerous songs on Kill 'Em All that have got huge choruses and anthemic choruses, stuff that they're still playing those songs live now because they work so well in a live setting. Seek and Destroy being the obvious one, and Hit the Lights, I suppose, and Whiplash as well. They're all things that people can bellow along after a few beers. Which were maybe some of the later thrash bands, the bands that followed after them. Although there's always stuff you can shout along to. They weren't they weren't melodically strong, a lot of those bands. It was more about the speed and the aggression, whereas with Metallica, the song was always paramount, even when they were playing at 100 miles an hour.
Okay, one more time.
The other thing was, if you listen to that record, yes, it's got the fast and furious riffing, but you immediately hear a little bit of light and shade. There's a bit of tone there. They weren't just going straight for broke, sprinting all the way through. They knew you had to have a balance. The highs are only high if there are lows to emphasize how good those highs really are. But the fact is, it defined the genre because it was head and shoulders above the genre, not because they were the first.
I don't think Kill 'Em All is their best album, but it's, you know, it's got a spirit to it that people really identify with, and they did come fully formed. Their sound, the Metallica sound, was there from day one, so it is a really, really strong record, and there aren't many better debuts or more influential debuts than that.
But they started to get bigger and bigger, and then we did Ride the Lightning. And Ride the Lightning was a completely different situation for them. Johnny Z, by that time, had kind of run out of money. So we stepped in and said, all right, well, we'll pay to record it, and we set them up in Denmark in this little studio with Flemming Rasmussen, I think his name is. Then a few weeks went by and I hadn't heard anything, so on the phone I spoke to Lars, and he kept saying, no, everything's great, man, everything's great, we're on course, it's fantastic. And then another couple of weeks went by and I'm thinking, well, they must be, you know, getting on for finish now. So I said, have you got any roughs you can send me? Not exactly. And I thought, I don't like the sound of this. So I got on a plane to Denmark. And the first thing I discovered was that there was an elephant beer dispenser in the reception. So my suspicions were aroused immediately. And when I went in, they were still getting a drum sound. And this was 6 weeks into it. We ended up sort of kicking some ass and sort of having some conversations, etc. And then they got on with it. And so by the time Ride the Lightning was finished, it was actually a stunning record. I mean, a stunning record. And it was kind of a turning point for them and a benchmark for a lot of other bands.
Is that what you got for us?
Given the fact that we're talking about a year, literally, between the first Metallica album, Kill 'Em All, in 1983, and the second one, Ride the Lightning, in 84, it's astonishing what a leap they've made.
Maiden and Priest were making great albums around then, but Metallica suddenly sounded like the best metal band in the world when Ride the Lightning came out. That was the difference. And their contemporaries, which, you know, Megadeth and Slayer and Anthrax, were just getting started at that point. And Metallica were kind of going, bye.
They had grown into their reputation, and straight away, as with all leaders of a genre, they superseded it. They outgrew it.
Ride the Lightning was, it sounded as if it had been recorded by a completely different band. They used a professional studio. They went to Sweet Silence in Copenhagen, where Rainbow and a couple of other big rock bands had recorded. They liked the sound that those bands had achieved at this studio. And then they had this producer, Flemming Rasmussen, who runs the studio there, who really, really knew his stuff. So, coupled with the fact that they'd matured as songwriters and they'd written these amazing songs, which were incredibly precise and a lot more progressive and complex, and then they had a really good production as well, when you compare the two records side by side, they sound completely different.
Metallica always had the thrash element in the 80s, but they added different light and shade, different diversity, different styles. They did an instrumental, Call of Cthulhu, on Ride the Lightning. But most important, they did Fade to Black. And I remember just before Ride the Lightning came out, they just finished the album, interviewing James Hetfield and Lars Ulrich for the very first time in London, talking about the album, which I hadn't heard at the time. And James saying, we've done a ballad. And then he looked to the ceiling and said, I don't know how our fans are going to take to us doing a ballad. It's not really what they want from us, is it? But we've done a ballad, and we're very proud of it. And Lars actually was a lot more bullish, saying, you know what, this is Metallica. If they're Metallica fans, will understand what it's all about. It's still intense, it's still heavy, it's just not super fast. So immediately, you had this Metallica do a ballad shock? What is this? Have they gone folk?
It's hard to imagine Metallica recording a song called, like Fade to Black on Kill 'Em All. At that point, I think if anyone had suggested, let's do a song that has really prominent acoustic guitars at the beginning, and it's a kind of meditation on suicide and, you know, misery and all the rest of it, that couldn't have happened on the first album because they were still going, yeah, we're a fucking metal band, come on! And on Ride the Lightning, they were still doing that, but they'd grown up just enough to be able to get away with doing something like that.
Back then, in 84, extreme metal bands weren't writing anything remotely that would fall into the sort of rock power ballad category. And although it isn't really what you'd call a ballad, it certainly has a sort of quiet bit, which was people weren't really expecting. Quite a lot of quiet.
I think they did. I don't think even now any other band can do ballads the way Metallica do them. I mean, a lot of bands do ballads and it just sounds totally cheesy, but Metallica do it still sounds heavy, you know what I mean, and emotional in a good way.
And the thing is, because it's still quite raw as well, at that time before James Hetfield's actually, like, his vocals get, not that his vocals are, but his vocals are good on it, but before he's obviously come into, like, big time producers, and they've made him, his vocals sound so much better, and he's got vocal lessons and whatever, or anything like that, and it's excellent, you know what I mean, it keeps it that raw vein sounding really good.
When they play Fade to Black, when you hear it on the record, when you see them play it live, they're not crying into their beers over a girl that dumped them. I mean, it's that kind of sort of, you know, fist held to the chest kind of manly sadness, you know, just when you sort of cough and light a cigarette and just get on with your day sort of thing, you know. It's a very kind of macho kind of sadness, you know, because I mean it's still very powerful, you know, but the thing is James Hetfield's never bleeding in it, you know. I mean, you don't hear him just feel like he's just going to, like, break up into pieces or whatever. He's basically just saying that, well, you know, life is shit sometimes, you know, and that's about as far as it goes.
What they used to be. at me. Growing darkness taking on, yeah, the hours move, but now he is gone. Yeah, yeah, yeah. Hey!
And the way Kirk Hammett played guitar was one of the first times you ever heard what he could do as a technician. There's a richness to this tone. He doesn't just play off the rhythm and the riff, he's playing off the chorus as well. And I think as a result, it's far more tuneful and far more enveloping and far smoother in a way than anything they had done. So this was a template very much for what they were to do even more successfully in subsequent years.
They kind of allowed themselves a freedom with their style very early on, which enabled them to do something like Fade to Black without anyone going, well, that's a bit sissy. You know, no one thought that at the time. Everyone just sat there with their jaw on the floor going, fuck me, that's one of the best things I've ever heard in my life. They could bring an atmosphere and bring a feeling to metal songs that other bands wouldn't have been able to grasp what they were doing. And I don't think it was something they sat around and thought about. It's an instinctive, intuitive thing that Metallica had. You know, they were great songwriters and great musicians, but they just had an instinctive feel for what made metal work. And in the same way that Judas Priest and Iron Maiden also had those same gifts, Metallica just took it to another level because they were just heavier, you know, and yet they could play the most delicate, lilting bit of acoustic guitar in Fade to Black, or do a really slow drop-down bit where there's hardly anything happening in Creeping Death and the crowd's going, die, die, you know, do something as simple as that. And yet it sends shivers down your spine, whereas other bands would just blast away at 100 miles an hour, and, you know, as brilliant as that can be, it's, you know, you can't argue with class, really, and Metallica had lots of class.
Well, it's always been a live favourite, Creeping Death. Well, it's got that really good audience participation bit. We all know it. Die by my hand, all of that. So you get 50,000 Gumbies all giving it that all the time. It's a little bit Nuremberg rally, but it's pretty damn good fun.
Creeping Death combined a lot of classic metal elements. It had this amazing lyrical subject, which was the biblical plagues in Egypt, which was just fantastic. And then it had this riff in it, which was highly catchy. It wasn't quite thrash, but it certainly wasn't mainstream metal. If anything, it had more in common with Iron Maiden than other metal bands of the day, like Sabbath and whoever.
It actually took an Exodus song, Die by the Sword. Now, Exodus were the band Kirk Hammett had been in subsequent, prior to joining up with Metallica. And he took that song with him. And they changed a little bit of it around, but it was based on that track that Metallica developed, Creeping Death. So in those two terms, it was a song inspired by the Bible and based on a song by one of their closest rivals in the Bay Area at the time.
It's not just you banging it out. It's got a bit more feel to it. And I mean, what a riff! I mean, God Almighty, that is one hell of a riff. And I think that was a song that really, even the people that were slightly sceptical after Kill 'Em All, when people heard Creeping Death, I think, you know, as the single, they were quite shocked because they sort of thought, Christ, I mean, you know, it's a really great song. It flattened just about everything around at that time with the power. So, yeah, it's a great track.
To let the song breathe a lot more, you know what I mean? Like, traditional thrash had just been 100 mile an hour and in your face, and that's great. But I think they maybe took it to a different step, a different view on thrash with that, you know. And just to basically, that's it. I mean, they gave the song space to breathe rather than just being straight down your throat.
It is. It's just like you've got the stabs at the beginning, and then it goes down to it goes back down to the riff, and James Hetfield's playing the riff on his own, and then everybody knows it's about to come in. You know what I mean? And the big tom fall comes in, and it's straight in, and the crowd goes mad. It's a good song for the crowd to go mad.
It's definitely one of the best songs on Ride the Lightning, and it has this incredible solo in it, which Kirk, to this day, refers to as one of his favourites. It has this amazing fretboard tapping section at the end, and then it ends in this incredible sort of pyrotechnic explosion, which makes it one of the high points of the record easily.
You know it, motherfucker!
I think all guitar solos, to a certain extent, can sound very dated. It's a question of time and the times we're living in now. Grunge kind of killed the guitar solo, and now when you listen to heavy metal from the 80s, a lot of the guitar solos do almost sound out of place. Certainly live, Kirk Hammett was terrible for, and still is terrible, for noodling around and just playing too much and getting too involved in his own guitar prowess, and it's just like, oh, turn off, go away, you know, time for a pint, you know. I don't need to hear a 20-minute extended guitar solo. Kirk Hammett is terrible for doing that. Always has been, probably always will, but then he is a guitarist.
I think he was very much from the sort of Van Halen school of playing, where it's just like, I mean, it was just sort of just high on the neck, you know, and just like, I'm going to do a whittly bit here, I'm going to do a whittly bit here, and I'm going to squeeze this in. And it's just like, you know, whoa, look at me doing this, you know. It's just like there's a sort of lyricism that he began to achieve, I think, later on, you know. But yeah, then it was like, it was really bold and new and obviously incomprehensible to the general record buying public. They'd never heard anything like that.
Creeping Death is a live favourite, always has been, always will be. For Whom the Bell Tolls has to be. You can't go and see Metallica and not hear that song. That song is tremendous.
I'll tell you what's cool about For Whom the Bell Tolls is it's got a big, ominous sounding tolling bell at the beginning of it. Black Sabbath by Black Sabbath, Hell's Bells by AC/DC, For Whom the Bell Tolls by Metallica. There you go. That's why it's one of the coolest metal songs of all time. You stick a big bell going bong at the beginning of a metal song, it sounds fucking cool.
For whom the bell tolls! Hey, 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 hey! Don't stop now, man! Make us proud,
It was based on the Ernest Hemingway story, which is very much a love story about things that don't work out right. And apparently it was introduced into the band by Cliff Burton. Cliff thought it might be a great idea to write a song around that particular story. And because it's an epic story, Metallica constructed an epic poem. It's a tone poem in many respects. And I don't think it's overestimating what it does. It's a great metal piece, but it's a tone poem with lots of different things going on.
As a song, it's quite basic, it's quite repetitive, but it kind of works on that level that it is quite a basic song, repetitive, and like any hit single, I guess, it becomes lodged in your head for some reason or other, and it's almost the simplicity of it, combined with the heaviness of it, for what it is, that works.
It was all in E, the bottom tone that Metallica always used, and it pointed directly at the sort of stripped-down songwriting they'd employ later on for the Black Album and after that. And that's one reason why it's such a live anthem. It's simple, everybody knows it. It's a short song, it's easy to digest. It's one of the epic songs on Ride the Lightning for sure.
Yeah, I don't know. It is a bit short, actually. In fairness, it's one of those songs that you kind of think they could have dragged it out, because by the time they actually get to like the second verse or the second chorus, it's about 4 minutes has passed, and then there's kind of a solo, and then it goes into that fade out ending with the bell going off again. But it's just, you know, I don't think to say that there's something imperfect about a track from Ride the Lightning. Just, you know, if I say that, I'm going to feel like I'm talking bollocks, really, because it's off Ride the Lightning. You know, there's nothing wrong with Ride the Lightning, for fuck's sake. You know.
What has made Ride the Lightning so popular with Metallica fans is the overall, the whole, which is greater than the sum of the parts. It's a very well constructed album that to this day you put on and you listen to it and you think, Kill 'Em All, the first album, was very primitive and raw. The production really doesn't stand out anymore. The songs come through. Ride the Lightning still sounds, if not quite state of the art, not that far off.
Elektra loved the album, and we were doing some other business with Elektra at the time with bands like Rogue Mail and all sorts of things, so we had a whole load of deals going on with them at the time. And they said, well, look, I'll tell you what, you know, you paid for the last one, we'll pay for the next one and give you the European rights for free. Oh, okay. So we got Master of Puppets for free. And Master of Puppets was the one that kicked it big time.
They delivered the best album of their career at the time when they needed to. They needed to make a brilliant record that didn't alienate all the fans that were going to put their records into the top 5, you know, because they were the world's biggest cult band when that album was released, when Master of Puppets was released. And by the end of that touring cycle, they were just one of the biggest metal bands in the world.
It redefined thrash again, and it raised the bar for thrash again. And it came out in the same year as Rain in Blood by Slayer, and both those albums made everyone else look like a bunch of twats. It's just absolutely made a mockery of everyone else's efforts, because like, this is what metal in the mid-80s is supposed to be about, and everyone else was kind of left going, yeah, okay, what are we supposed to do now? We're not going to be able to top that.
You can hey!
All these amazing songs would have been nothing if there hadn't been a really, really killer production. And Flemming Rasmussen, who once again produced the album in Sweet Silence in Copenhagen, did a great, great job.
Fantastic job. And I don't think he's ever really got the credibility that he deserves for the sound. And I mean, he was working with a bunch of guys who had never done anything, and he brought that together brilliantly.
One of the things that Lars said later on when they recorded Justice for All was that the Puppets album sounded as if it was coming about 2 meters away from behind the speakers, which is a result of the mixing rather than the actual recording. But he was right, there's a lot of space on the album, there's lots of room to breathe. Have a look at the song Orion, which breaks down at least twice into a smaller solo section. There's tons and tons of air that you can hear. It's a really atmospheric album, actually.
In the same way that Ride the Lightning blew Kill 'Em All away, Master of Puppets blew Ride the Lightning away, and it blew everyone else away with it. And the things that they did on that album were incredibly mature is probably the wrong word, because there were still a bunch of crazy metalheads at that point, but the evolution that they were undergoing at that point was startling. You know, it was hair-raising to watch this band go from playing Whiplash and singing songs about drinking beer to doing 8-minute epics like the title track, which is just phenomenal.
Depending on when you hear Master Puppets, whether it's from the beginning, or a third in, 2/3 in, whatever, you could be forgiven for thinking that they were different songs, because there's just so many changes that are going on, and it's almost like a memory game when you see it live, because it's just like you want to be one of the ones who knows exactly when they stop, exactly when to throw the horns, exactly when to just kind of shout some lyric or whatever, because it is extremely complex. I mean, just like it must have been a beast to play the first few times they tried, because it's just like, how do you remember all that?
The song Master of Puppets has a riff which sounds a little bit more complex than it is. It has a chord change from E to F sharp as well, which sort of elevates the tension. There's a sort of stop-start section in the chorus where James is shouting, "Master, Master, Master!" The vocal line duplicates the guitar line. So it sounds like a complex tune, but actually when you listen to it a few hundred times and break it down to its basic elements, it's just a classic bit of metal songwriting, no more than that.
Master of Puppets was certainly a complex track. It was a complex album, and the band were tight. They were on fire. They were having a real buzz about them. They had a real buzz about them, and rightly so.
It's one of those albums that will never die. If you're a metal fan and Master of Puppets isn't in your top 10 albums of all time, then you are a twat. Master! Master! Master!
Although Cliff's presence isn't any higher in the mix on Puppets than it is on previous albums, his songwriting influence is all over it. You've got to remember that by this point, Cliff had been in the band for something like 3 years, and in that time he had been teaching the other guys about the rudiments of musical theory, because he was a trained pianist. He'd studied Bach, he'd studied all sorts of classical theory, and he passed those lessons on to James and Lars.
It was Cliff who gave them that anchor that allowed them to go on and explore different areas of music. And I really feel you listen to what they did with Master of Puppets, and they were never again so enriched in such a diverse manner.
Cliff Burton is not an average bassist. He's like classically trained. You know, he's been playing since he was in the womb, and you know, and he just kind of sees himself as having every bit as much right to kind of take center stage as, you know, Kirk Hammett or James Hetfield should be. You know, I mean, there's a reason why he's like a bass hero. It's just because he just didn't take that shit.
Well, he was just so fucking cool as well. You know, I mean, you know, you can see I modelled my haircut on Cliff Burton. You know, it's you know, the man had really fucking long hair and he wore flares. You know, no one else in a thrash metal band wore flares. That's a that's a fact. You know. And no one said, oh, you look a bit stupid in your flares, mate. They all just went, you're Cliff Burton, I love you. You know, Cliff Burton, cool, on a stick.
I saw them in the UK, then they went, about a week later, Cliff died.
We all spoke to them, and I'm sure Johnny Z spoke to them as well, because he was probably still closer to them than anybody. I know I spoke to them, but it was very much a decision that they had to come to themselves, and they took some time off to decide what they were going to do. But I always had the feeling that it was touch and go, and that it could have gone either way. And these things happen. I mean, these things happen to a lot of groups. And one thing goes, you know, I mean, obviously in this case it's something that went tragically wrong. I mean, it can't go worse.
Cliff died midway through the Master of Puppets tour. It was in Scandinavia, so they still had quite a lot of dates that they were yet to finish there. When Jason was confirmed as the new bass player, they went back and actually played all of those shows that they hadn't played, that were still on the itinerary. And that was a really brilliant move by them, because it was a way of breaking Jason in a low-key manner. It wasn't like they were coming out with a new album and they were going on a massive tour. It was, here's the new guy, we're doing a few shows, and we're also honouring our commitment to our fans, which I thought was amazing, considering nobody would have minded had they said, well, we won't do those shows now. Nobody was going to kick up a fuss. It was a really good idea for them the way they brought Jason in that way, and it got everybody excited and on board ahead of what was to come.
It's so strange, isn't it, that Metallica, subsequent to Cliff Burton dying, got in a new bassist, and the first thing they did was a covers EP with Diamond Head, Budgie, Misfits, and I think it actually was a very cunning and very clever move, because to go straight into the studio and do a new record with all new songs would have put an enormous amount of pressure onto Jason Newsted's shoulders. They introduced him into the Metallica way of doing things by doing something very different.
It was a slightly unusual move, partly because of the songs that they covered. They covered songs from the new wave of British heavy metal. There was a song by Holocaust, there was one by Diamond Head, but there was also a Killing Joke song as well, so there was something of Cliff's punk and post-punk influences going on there.
So fucking what? I've been to Hickston and I've been to Brighton, I've been to Woodstock too. So what? So what? Well, I've been here, I've been there, I've been every fucking where. So what? So what? So what? So what, you poor little cunt? Who cares? Who can do no? Who cares? Who cares about no?
Time I heard So What, I just thought it was Metallica. I didn't know, and then I found out later, and I heard the original. I love that as well now, you know what I mean? But it doesn't matter to me. I just loved the way they'd done the song, and if it was their own, I'd have loved it.
It was just totally different. Nice to hear something like that.
It's a great song. I had it in my car constantly for one summer. Windows down, drive by the school, full blast.
Who cares? Who cares about no?
Metallica have recorded various punk songs, and to me they do it by the numbers really. They don't have the punk edge, they don't have the punk rawness. Their aggression is entirely of the metal school. Nonetheless, it's doable. Quite a few bands have attempted this. Megadeth did a cover of Anarchy in the UK. Slayer recorded a whole album of punk covers in '96. It can be done, but it doesn't really compare to the original stuff.
Well, I fucked this, I fucked that. I've even fucked the schoolgirl's twat. So what? So what? So what? So what? You born old fuck? Who cares? Who cares? You do? Yeah, who cares? Who cares about you? No, 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 no,
You know, that's them just showing everyone where they come from, in the same way that Bread Fan is as well. Budgie, a very underrated band, not really very liked because they've had a really stupid sounding singer and lots of very, very bizarre song titles like Hot as a Docker's Armpit and In the Grip of a Tire Fitter's Hand. So they weren't the most obviously commercial band ever, but they were quite good.
Bread Fan shows to me that when Metallica want to, how they can improve their version of a song over the original if they want. The original Bread Fan was a great song, but it wasn't recorded particularly with an awful lot of budget and an awful lot of aggression. When Metallica did it, their version was amazing. It was absolutely incendiary. It was really, really fast, really, really precisely played, and it has this old school, slightly bluesy element because the riff is based on a bend.
Bread Fan's a weird one because it is more simplistic and it is more bluesy than the kind of thing you'd expect them to do, but it sounds perfectly natural. I mean, I think there's other stuff that they've covered that doesn't sound particularly natural, but they were obviously having fun doing it, so you kind of go, oh well, you know, it's a laugh listening to them doing it. But a great song, you know, Kurt plays a brilliant solo in that one. It's very, you know, it's quite simple, quite rock and roll, quite bluesy, but it sounds like, you know, it does sound like Metallica.
And because he wasn't trying to emulate the solo at the time by a guy called Tony Ball, he did it in his own way. And because he did it in his own way, he put his own stamp on it, while strangely enough also paying an enormous amount of respect to the way the original sounded. So he did a really good job of crossing that bridge, because you want a cover to sound enough like the original to recognise it, but sufficiently individual so it doesn't just sound like a note-for-note copy. It's not mimicking, it's emulating.
I think Metallica effectively disappeared up their own arseholes on Justice for All. From the first album to the second album and the third album, they'd up the ante, and I think they thought the only way to really up the ante here was to be more complex, more dark lyrically, you know, and it just, what they forgot was that they hadn't really written any great riffs.
They're all very, very good compositions, but they're all very uncomfortable. And I think that's the point that people make these days with Justice for All. It's not a happy album, it's not a pleasant album, and it's an album that you feel a little bit like you want to back away from.
On Justice for All, you got the first fruits of, you know, the first signs that James Hetfield was beginning to sing about himself a bit more, particularly on Dyer's Eve, which is about his horrendous childhood and how, you know, how appallingly his dad, you know, would treat him, and that he had quite religious parents, you know, and how, you know, the dim view they took of everything that James Hetfield stood for, and how he felt that he was a disappointment to them, and how they were cruel to him, and all this kind of stuff, you know.
The lyrics on Justice for All, for the first time, were political. They didn't really allude directly to any particular institutions or organisations, but it was apparent that rather than singing about Satan and all those ridiculous cliches as they had done on early records, they weren't singing about biblical plagues in Egypt anymore. They were singing about subjects much closer to home.
There are reasons why people don't regard it with quite the same level of, you know, of love and kind of hysterical enthusiasm that they do Master of Puppets, and The production is one, you know, that clicky kick drum sound, which is actually quite irritating. The fact that you can't hear the bass guitar. It's a very stripped down album in some ways, and because the songs are actually more progressive and more complex and more kind of self-indulgent than anything they'd done before, if it had had the production that Master of Puppets or Ride the Lightning had, a bigger, warmer, you know, fuller sound, perhaps it wouldn't, you know, it would have been as revered as Master of Puppets.
It was decided, and I use "it was" rather than the band decided, because I'm not convinced they ever went along with it wholeheartedly, but it was decided that Mike Klink, who'd worked with Guns N' Roses on Appetite for Destruction, should be the guy to produce what was to be And Justice for All. And they went into the studio and it did not work. And they spent ages trying to make it work, and eventually ran out of money and ran out of time, or came close to running out of both. And they did the only thing that was logical. They ran back to the guy they understood, Fleming Rasmussen, and said, help! We need to make an album, and fast, and not much money, because a lot of the budget has gone on things we're never going to use. So there's a feeling of rushing it. And I think that's part of the reason why the bass is so low, because I think they rushed everything and probably didn't realise at the time the bass is fairly heavily mixed down. You can't hear Jason Newsted.
There is no bass on that album. Where it is the biggest question in Metallica's career that everybody asks, and there is no answer. Jason Newsted obviously plays bass on it. You see the songs live and there are bass lines, but in way of production it was certainly not there.
I interviewed Jason a couple of years ago for my book, and he told me that while Justice was being mixed, it had been recorded, while it was being mixed they were touring on the Monsters of Rock thing with Van Halen and the rest of them, and in between shows James and Lars were driving down to the studios where the album was being mixed. And at one point they said to the mixers, take the bass down to where you can barely hear it, and then knock a dB off the top of that as well. So I said to Jason, well, why would they do this? You know, you're a great bass player. And they said they had a multitude of reasons. One of them was they weren't too confident about his skills when he was replacing Cliff. Secondly, there was a slight click because his plectrum was hitting the strings, but that's stupid because you can take that out anyway in the production. So it would seem simply that they didn't really want his presence too high on the album, or you could spin it the other way and say that the guitar sound which James had used on the album was so vast that in fact it was appropriate to take up bass frequency space, but it's endlessly debatable.
You're beginning to get a more kind of an angry, more personal Metallica coming through, and you've got something like One, which is obviously, you know, one of the most harrowing things that they've ever written about. You know, it's in some respects One is a kick-ass metal song, but if you actually read the lyrics and try and put yourself in the mind of the character in One, there isn't anything more horrific than that, really.
One is the standout track. It starts off with the helicopters and the machine guns, leads into something very doomy, which they borrowed and were inspired by a Venom track called Buried Alive, and then slowly opens up into this huge grey anthem. And grey is what really, colours is the wrong word, what really shades it and makes One such a magnificent track that to this day is such a crucial part of their live set.
Lars' drumming at the beginning of One, when they're playing, when it's the kind of mellow acoustic parts, is a bit heavy-handed, shall we say. And I think some producers would not have mixed his kick drum and snare quite as loud as they did on One, because it is kind of like, you know, they're playing these beautiful harmonies and stuff on the guitars, and then there's this bloke hitting biscuit tins in the background, you know, which doesn't help, you know. But I don't think there's anything wrong with his drumming per se on it. I think it's just the way it's mixed. It's just not, you know, it is a bit, you know, a bit ham-fisted, really.
Lars has never been credited as being the best drummer ever. Nonetheless, that shouldn't take away from the fact that he is a highly competent drummer. One thing that does annoy a few people is that occasionally he doesn't know when to lay back and take it easy. An example might be the first section of One, which is supposedly a melodic, sort of quiet section. He could have laid off a little bit. There's another song on Reload called Unforgiven 2, which is extremely quiet and mellow in its first section, and Lars is all over the place hitting the snare. He could really have done some rim shots or something just to keep it down a little bit, but that's his style.
Just like a wartime novelty, tied to the scenes that make me live. Cut this shit off from me, hold my breath is dying, wish for death. Oh, please start waiting.
But you actually listen to this song and it's so claustrophobic. It's about someone who's alive inside, who can't communicate. And there is an element there of James Hetfield, because I think to some extent he was alive inside, but couldn't actually feel he could communicate his despair and the fact he was slowly falling into the trap of allowing his demons to come out. I believe Unjustice for All is a confused record. It's a band who are angry because Cliff Burton had died. It's a band who are depressed because of that, but a band who are also determined. There's a real feeling sometimes of tracks like Harvester of Sorrow, which is about a drug addict who kills his own family. That's a bit shocking sometimes. It's not a happy album.
Harvester of Sorrow is quite pedestrian. It plods along. You can understand why it was released as a single. You can understand why people like it live, but realistically, it's just a bit average.
They should have been writing another Orion, or another Battery or something like that. And instead, it's just this kind of, just really sort of tepid and, generic Metallica song. It's like they didn't want to become formulaic, but I think it was like one of the first signs that Metallica were starting to run out of ideas.
It was the end of the line there. There's no way they could go any further down that line. They had to do something radically different. And what they did was reinvented themselves so brilliantly that, it was a masterstroke, the Black Album.
The last thing you want Metallica to do was keep on releasing the same album, you know what I mean? Because they've never done that, so why would they start? Yeah. I think it's good, the progression's good.
The progression is good. And it got them a million times more fans, so it's still one of the biggest selling albums. So.
The first 4 albums, it's just Metallica, and it's fantastic, and they were the coolest band on the planet. The Black Album, they weren't our band anymore. You know, as a committed metalhead, they stopped being my band then, and they became loads of other people's band instead.
Let's put it this way. The Black Album, Metallica's big commercial breakthrough, was designed that way. It was tailored to be big. However, I still maintain this is the darkest album they ever made. These are songs about split personalities. These are songs that really do cry out for help. Enter Sandman itself is like that. This is about a man or a person who can't sleep. This is about a man who gets into a different world, a different dimension, a different mindset because of the nightmares he's having. This is the man who can't actually deal comfortably with what life is doing. That makes it such a dark record for me.
My God, when you heard just the intro, and as soon as the riff came in on Enter Sandman, you knew that they got it back.
We know they're going to play Enter Sandman as an encore because it's the biggest selling record they've ever had, you know, and it is a brilliant song and it does work live, but you listen to the album and it's so glossy and so polished and so overblown and so huge sounding, you can't hope to reproduce that live.
But Enter Sandman's just got everything, hasn't it? I mean, it's just, you know, slightly scary lyrics that make you want to look under the bed. That's a good start. Nice bit of wah-wah from Kirk on the playing there. Some nice feel. Great drumming from Lars. You don't hear those words in that order in the same sentence many times, do you? Actually, he's a better drummer than people give him credit for. I mean, come on. I don't think you can be the drummer in Metallica and be rubbish.
Down to sleep.
Now I lay me down to sleep.
Pray the Lord my soul to keep.
Pray the Lord my soul to keep.
If I die before I wake.
If I die before I wake.
Pray the Lord my soul to take.
Pray the Lord my soul to keep.
But still, baby, don't say a word. Never mind that noise you heard. It's just the bass under your bed. In your closet, in your head.
Black Album took everybody by surprise. And then when it came out, actually it made complete sense. I don't think anybody expected it to sell as hugely as it did, or to receive as much MTV and radio exposure as it did. But when you look back on it, and it's 15 years ago now, it's the obvious thing for Metallica to have done at that juncture in their careers.
They couldn't have known that grunge was going to hit that big in that year. They couldn't have known that the rock was going to change so dramatically. Nobody did. My God, if they'd have made an album like Justice at the time of the grunge hitting, they could have been in real trouble, because they would have looked like some, you know, Led Zeppelin or Yes or something, because it was a very overwrought kind of thing. This, by comparison, was perfect, and it set the album up. I mean, if you want to set an album up with what the new Metallica is all about, I mean, couldn't ask for any better than Enter Sandman.
One of the great things with the Black Album is it allowed James Hetfield for the first time to prove what a great voice he had. He'd done it before, but no one had realised, because it was all locked in with the metal theme and the power, the passion, the energy, the riffs. So that what James did sometimes got a little lost. But on the track like Nothing Else Matters, he suddenly was allowed to sing, and sing with a lot of depth and feeling, and got through to people who thought, God, that guy doesn't just growl, he can really sing.
You know, and this is the guy who just, you know, just sounded like he was just gonna just murder 1,000 people on Battery a few years before. And then all of a sudden he's just like singing this really weepy and bleeding and slightly embarrassing and absurd adolescent thing about a breakup, you know, that was supposed to happen years before, but, you know, he couldn't remember. You know, I mean, it's just like, who is that supposed to appeal to? Not metalheads. People who wanted to flick their lighter on. People who grew up with Bon Jovi, who grew up with the kind of cock rock and hair metal that thrash was there to destroy. You know, I mean, Bon Jovi was the Antichrist, and Metallica was there to right their wrongs. You know, that's what you listen to all that other shit for. You know, Metallica is supposed to be there kicking ass. And, yeah, and what was that about?
And nothing else matters. Never care for what we do. Never care for what we do. Yeah, I know.
They're going to write some big love song. They never are. They never have done. They never will. But they do write some quite moving stuff. And, you know, if you don't think that, then you really weren't there in '93 at Milton Keynes with a bit of a chill in the air, standing with a cigarette lighter above your hand, with everybody singing along. That was quite a moment. Oh.
Sad but true.
Sad but true. First of all, you've got this massive down-tuned guitar riff, but also James has a very sort of staccato, percussive, forceful vocal, which comes through. It's not over-complex. It's basically shouting words like hate, hate, I'm your hate, sort of almost anthemic, repeated sort of way.
Hey, hey, I'm your life. I'm the one who takes you there. Hey, hey, I'm your life. I'm the one who cares.
There's a thing about Sad but True that is so less is more. You know, I mean, it's just like you listen to Lars Ulrich's drumming, and it's like doon, 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 doon. You know, just this really, really simple but powerful kind of thing. He didn't have to be doing, well, you know, double kick drum or just like some insane kind of fill or whatever else, you know, because it's just like that's all the song needed.
The point of the Black Album, why it's a great album, is that yes, there are quite a lot of average tracks, but they loaded it up, didn't they, with a load of really, really big songs at the start of the record, and it sounded brilliant as well. Bob Rock did a fantastic job.
What Bob Rock had introduced to the band at that time was not so much the impetus to write stripped-down, simpler songs. I think that came from James and Lars themselves. But what he did do was beef up sound. There was a full bass presence. He made it radio-friendly. You've got to remember he'd worked with people like Motley Crue before he worked with Metallica. He knew how to make an album sound good on MTV through a little TV speaker or on the radio or whatever. So really he facilitated their desire to write simpler songs. People blame Bob Rock for too much. It's not like he sat down with them in the songwriting room and said, you can't do this, you've got to do that. What he did do was give them a very, very nice mainstream sound.
The Black Album is sonically, in one sense, sonically perfect. It's probably got the best production on it of any metal album ever. but it is more pedestrian, it's more middle of the road, it's more commercial, it's more simplistic. In many ways they regressed at that point, because if you look at the songs, they're the most straightforward bunch of songs they'd written since Kill 'Em All. In fact, in some ways more so. They're much more traditional in terms of structure.
They took 10 steps backward, you know, in their songwriting. I mean, it's just, and there's great songs on there, but they no longer were progressing as a creative band, they were progressing as a commercial band.
Brilliant record, but it's not exciting. I think that's the thing, and it should have been, you know. But then would they have sold 14 million albums if they'd you know, done Master of Puppets 2, fast, brutal, progressive? No, they wouldn't have done. They'd have sold about 3 copies.
The band, you know, were always going to be enormous because it was something that people weren't doing, and it was something that a lot of kids at that time could really relate to, the frenzy, the energy. I mean, you see them on stage in the early days, they were raw and nasty, but hell, I mean, that was a great, you know, some great shows.
Metallica were always a great live band, particularly during the, you know, the Halcyon days of the, you know, the late 80s and I guess early 90s when the Black Album was huge. They are a band that people are always going to want to go and see because they've got better songs than virtually anybody else. James Hetfield's got charisma coming out of his arse. You know, they're an incredibly powerful live band, and they are one of, you know, the biggest metal band of all time. And so why wouldn't you want to go and see them?
They wanted to change metal. Yes, every band has that ambition, but Metallica actually did it because they understood what it took to do it.
As great as all the other bands were, you know what I mean? Again, back to the whole point, they wrote songs and everything was a hook, you know what I mean? Even the heaviest parts of their music had a great hook in it, which I think is why they've done what they've done, you know what I mean? They've built a great career because they've wrote great songs and they've stayed true to what they are. I mean, they've stayed a metal band, which is the main thing.
Doesn't matter how bad Saint Anger was, doesn't matter how boring the Load and Reload albums were, doesn't matter how completely convoluted Justice was, there's still bits on everything, apart from Saint Anger, that are really good. And Metallica as a whole, I mean, you know damn well they're going to deliver as well. There's no doubt about it in my mind. If I would buy a ticket to see Metallica, always, because I know they will deliver. They will, as a live band, they will never let you down.
They're still Metallica, and that's the thing, you know. It doesn't matter what records they make now, they're a classic band, and everyone wants to hear what they do next. And even if it sucks, you're still going to go and see them live. That's the you know, that's the fact of the matter. You're still going to want to see them live because they're fucking Metallica, and they're cooler than you are.
Där satte han punkt för låten Lars Ulrich.